Just as an aside on the issue of the cookies, Beverly was checking in her notes this morning, and we began the cookie exchange, or she began the cookie exchange 5 years ago with 45 dozen cookies. This year it was over 200 dozen. So thank you all for that. Speaking of Beverly, not too long ago, in a moment of unguarded candor, she was asked to describe me to someone else, and she came up and said, well, he's oppositionally defiant. Can you believe that, Arthur? Oppositionally defiant.
She's a psychologist, she should know.
I know. It may be that somebody else knew something when I was asked to deliver today's inaugural reflection for the month of January, whose theme is resistance. Apropos of that theme, my holiday letter for this year stated, Christmas time, a season of hope and a time to act for a better tomorrow. Peaceful resistance, such as funding the ACLU, attending protest demonstrations, actively campaigning for enlightened politicians, participating in rapid response groups, and quietly but politely stating your views to those engaged in the destruction of basic democratic principles, all are good ways to regain agency, a mental health care and a gift that the whole nation needs. But upon further reflection, I have concluded that I left out the most effective tool we as Unitarians have to engage in persistent, civilized, effective resistance. Consider the following. On Wednesday morning, December 17th, I followed my customary practice of getting the Times-Union and a cup of coffee before me and sitting down to read the newspaper. There in the perspective section, Kathy Hochul wrote in an article titled, Why I'm Supporting Medical Aid in Dying. She wrote, the Medical Aid in Dying Act will afford terminally ill New Yorkers the right to spend their final days not under sterile hospital lights, but with sunlight streaming through their bedroom window. The right to spend their final days not hearing the droning hum of hospital machines, but instead the laughter of their grandkids echoing in the next room. The right to tell their family that they love them and be able to hear those words in return. It took 10 years of persistent, dedicated, steady work by a handful of people led by UUs here in Glens Falls, Albany, and elsewhere throughout the state to bring this humane legislation into law. Heroes who did this are among us today. If you're here, why don't you stand up? Bruce? Goodell? Let me finish. It's quite a list. Lori? Art? Julie? Lucy? Undine? Marion? And Linda. Thank you. They, and there are dozens of others, including Arliss Nygaard, who over many years, through untold disappointments, persevered in obtaining this magnificent achievement. I recall a year ago in the Assembly Chamber in Albany, with a group of others, as we stood and shouted to the legislators, pass the bill, pass the bill. When told to take our seats or be arrested, most of us complied, but not all. In an act of courageous civil disobedience, Marion Bigelow refused to sit. Marion's act of defiance and her sacrifice is of a distinct and a distinguished school occupied by other Unitarians. Thomas Aikenhood was executed in 1697 for denying the Trinity. In 1942, the Nazis sent Norbert Kapok, who originated our flower service, to Dachau for standing up for religious freedom. And in 1965, UU minister James Reeb was murdered for his protests in favor of civil rights in Selma, Alabama. These martyrs show that sacrifice on the altar of principle is a hallmark of the Unitarian faith, and because of that legacy, the impact of our faith in our society is significantly elevated. It's almost axiomatic that whenever major initiatives regarding the advancement of human rights are at peril, Unitarians will be present, often on the front lines fighting against the threat. Doing the right thing socially is almost instinctive within the UU heritage. As a religion, Unitarian Universalists punch way above their weight. In the U.S., there are about 130,000 UUs, or about 1% of organized religions. In New York State, with a population of 19.5 million people, there are only 3,000 to 5,000 registered UUs. But when it comes to human rights and social justice, UUs loom very large. Our religion's bedrock principles rest on tolerance, diversity, love, acceptance of others, and a bedrock faith in science. Our heritage does not accommodate hatred, divisiveness, brutality, and ignorance. We are committed as a people of faith to resist these forces by our words, our treasure, and most importantly, by our example. It has been said that UUs are a people of deeds, not creeds. While each person's spirituality reflects the unique journey they traveled, UUs recognize the interconnectedness of all things and all people through their deeds as well as their words. UUs constantly seek the betterment of their fellow human beings, all human beings. Our faith requires us individually and institutionally to seek a better world, and that is why social justice and individual activism are inherent in everything we do, and it informs those who keep our company. As is my habit lately, I sought input from my comrades in the men's breakfast group on the topic of this reflection, resistance. As expected, I was not surprised by the response. John Fisher cited David Brooks' recent op-ed in the New York Times, where Brooks wrote, "Trumpism is primarily about the acquisition of power." Interesting, I would write that on the day after they've invaded Venezuela, wouldn't I? For its own sake. It is a multi-front assault to make the earth a playground for ruthless men. So, of course, any institution that might restrain power must be weakened or destroyed. Trumpism is about ego, appetite, and acquisitiveness, and is driven by a primal aversion to the higher elements of the human spirit: learning, compassion, scientific wonder, the pursuit of justice. John joined Brooks in believing that a comprehensive national uprising, civic uprising, is needed to counter this assault, a power equal to or greater than that being wielded by Trump. And therein lies the answer to the question I raised at the outset of these remarks. Namely, how can we most effectively push back? We can push back by becoming a coherent, cohesive, healthy congregation. A group that effectively, publicly, and courageously stands for decency, respect, and tolerance, the precise antidote to Trump. Our congregation stands proudly against the forces that are at work in our national government and in the conduct of those who stand to benefit from its misdeeds. Our effectiveness as a bulwark against this mayhem is related to the health and vitality of our congregation, but we have been seriously challenged recently. Last summer, unexpectedly, Joe Cleveland, our minister, left us under terms that we pay for his salary for an additional 5 months. In preparation for the sale of this building, we stripped it of its contents, many items having emotional significance to us spiritually and personally. We relocated to Cafe Lena, which was generously made available to us, but which came with significant challenges regarding its use. The sale of this building collapsed in September, temporarily denying us access to proceeds needed for our new building. We resettled into the old building, and we have had a number of changes in our leadership in the last 6 months. These setbacks could be a source of despair and resignation, contributing to a feeling of ennui and an excuse to lose hope. After he delivered a sermon here in December, I discussed these matters with Tom Chulak. Tom, you might recall, served for many years as the UU regional coordinator, so he knows something about congregations. His assessment was that each of these challenges was sufficient to unsettle a congregation. But he then opined that with effective leadership and a strong, unified commitment from the members of the congregation, it would regain its cohesiveness, could recommit to its goals and objectives, complete the construction of a new building, and flourish. We certainly have a legacy worth building on. Imagine the faith Becky Hawkins and Barbara Henning had when they named the UUCSS in their estate plans. Because of that gift, we've been enriched by over $300,000. Or consider George Kerouac, who many of you don't know, but who was with us many years ago. And about 15 years ago, George persuasively demonstrated with statistics how a new building would directly foster the growth of our congregation. And recently consider the tireless work of the New Home Task Force that has brought us to the very cusp of realizing the long-sought dreams of a new church building. I believe that we can meet the challenge of regaining our vitality and sense of purpose. I believe that with new energy, we can forge ahead with the well-laid plans for our new church building, knowing that in the past, our growth plateaued when the size limitation of our present building limited growth. I believe that once we have regained our momentum as a vital presence in liberal religion in this community, our image as an organization that stands for decency, tolerance, and kindness will shine, and our congregation will be seen as a powerful antidote to the hatred and divisiveness that has consumed our national government. We will indeed be a beacon of hope and a powerful force of resistance. The dreadful consequences of not meeting the challenges our nation faces are simply unacceptable. It is incumbent upon us to fulfill our destiny, orient ourselves toward a future that we can help shape, and then move vigorously to secure that destiny. May it be so.